Joining us now from Washington, D.C., a staple on our show, Congressman, 3rd District, Democrat Bobby Scott, a lifetime member of the John Fredericks Show. He can call me, get on anytime he wants. Why? Because he was right in voting against the Iraq wars. He was right in voting against Patriot Act 1, Patriot Act 2, Patriot Act 3. He was right in voting against the NSA spy scheme. He was right in saying that you can't launch wars and cut taxes simultaneously. Craziest thing ever. He was right for being against NAFTA back in the 90s. He was right being against these crazy mandatory drug sentences like 3 strikes, you're out, which has all these nonviolent criminals giving the U.S. the highest incarceration rate in the free world. And he was absolutely right railing against more of these trade deals. Joining us now, Bobby Scott. Congressman, good to have you with us. We agree on so much. I always feel you're in the wrong party.
Hey, John. Well, one of us is in the wrong party. How you doing?
I tell you what, I'm doing fantastic, and just want to tell all my friends out there in Norfolk and Portsmouth, we don't do a lot of political endorsements, but we want everybody to go out there in the 79th vote for my good friend Johnny Giuano. Now, let's go. You heralded the landmark Supreme Court decision the other day having to do with religious freedom of expression with the Abercrombie and Fitch suit. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, that was a fairly straightforward case. It was simply religious discrimination. They weren't hiring anyone. They weren't hiring anybody of that faith. I mean, even I think I believe it was Scalia saw it that way. So that wasn't that complicated a case. If you can't discriminate based on religion, then that was pretty much an open and shut case.
So basically, what that case was, because it started because of what the young lady wanted to wear, and then it went really beyond that, in that they just hadn't hired anybody of her particular religion, right?
Right, and so it, like I said, it became a pretty open and shut case. Once you decide you're not hiring people that wear that attire, and that had nothing to do with their ability to do the job.
Okay,
so that was fairly that wasn't that complicated a case. If we're going to have a prohibition against discrimination based on religion, then that case follows pretty easily.
Patriot Act, the spying provisions, bulk data collection from the NSA expiring. Happy about that, but I really thought that what is it called, the Freedom Act? I thought that was a scam. Right. Same thing under a separate name. I mean, basically the FISA court is a rubber stamp. They ask for it, they get it. I mean, why do we continue on with this stuff, Congressman Scott, when you've got the FBI saying there's absolutely no evidence that it's had any impact on anything?
That's why we got rid of the bulk collection.
Right.
And it frankly, you look back, you'd be hard pressed to find any rollback of police powers. And you go like 60 years, try to find an incident where the police powers were actually rolled back, and they had this metadata collection where they collected everything, and we actually rolled that back. And insisted if you're going to get any information, you have to have an individualized, articulable suspicion to go looking after data. When we passed it, we thought we had limited it. It said you could get information relevant to an ongoing investigation. How anybody can interpret that to require a phone company to give every phone call every individual made was just absolutely absurd. And the NSA, I think, they obviously kept it a secret. The famous clip of the director telling Senator Ron Wyden that they weren't, in fact, collecting that kind of data, which was just not true. I mean, so they were keeping it a secret, and Snowden, it was good and bad. One of the good things he did was expose this practice for what it was.
Is he now? There's no question Eric Snowden broke the law, right? That's clear. Is he a traitor?
Right. I think he had some good and some bad. I think revealing the facts of what the NSA was doing, I think that was good. I think he's. I'm not sure exactly what he has done overseas and releasing information and compromising American security. So I think there's a lot of bad in what he did. Had he just stopped at notifying the press that illegal activity was going on in the NSA, I think that would have been a huge plus. But I mean, when you add up all the minuses, I think it's not as good.
Fast track Trans-Pacific Partnership trade. As you know, I was against NAFTA when that went out in the 90s. I predicted that 10 million manufacturing jobs would go away. I was off by 4 million. We lost almost 15 million manufacturing jobs. Now we got this other deal coming down the pipe. Basically,
you have a couple of individual members. One in El Paso said that his city lost 30,000 jobs. And a representative from Rochester said they lost tens of thousands of jobs in Rochester alone as a direct result of NAFTA. So, I mean, it had a devastating impact on manufacturing jobs.
Now, you look at the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and Fast Track, which is like, I call it NAFTA on Viagra. I mean, we've got countries that are going to be in this thing, congressmen like Vietnam, who are paying their workers an average wage of 53 cents an hour. Even the Chi-Coms are outsourcing jobs to Vietnam. How does this make any sense for the United States worker?
Well, it for the worker, it doesn't. And that's the problem. I heard one expert say that if these trade deals worked perfectly, it would put slight downward pressure on wages. That hurts workers. I mean, if it works perfectly, there would be a mild downward pressure. If it doesn't work very well, it'd be huge downward pressure, because what happens is that when you open up all the barriers, then you go to the lowest wages. And that obviously gives a big advantage to the low wages. You talked about Vietnam. They're paying pennies, they're paying peanuts compared to what people can make in the United States. So why would you keep your jobs in the United States? That's downward pressure on wages.
This is the elitist and the globalist. It's even beyond 1%ers. It's a 0.25% of big globalist countries. Their continued worldwide search for slave labor, and it is absolutely astonishing to me that this thing might actually go through when it's so devalues the U.S. worker. It's going to screw the working man and woman. It's going to take whatever manufacturing jobs we have now. Those are going to get sucked out. It's just amazing to me how many Republicans are behind this thing.
Well, the fact is that it helps business. So those that and therefore expands wage and wealth inequality. The wealthy will do well under this because they can cut costs and make more money. The workers don't do well because there's downward pressure on wages. I mean, everybody knows that going in. And, some say, well, there's downward pressure already or something. I don't know what the argument is, but anything that creates downward pressure on wages, I think, is a bad thing. Now, if there were some meaningful compensation, like if part of it were an increase in the minimum wage, if there was job creation or education or job training or job creation or government spending creating jobs to offset the damage that the trade deal would do, then you'd have something to measure. But I mean, you look at the transportation bill. We're cutting jobs in transportation. The transportation bill is there's almost no new construction. And so, we go back to, you cut all the taxes, you don't have any money. The transportation bill doesn't have money for virtually no money for new construction, and that would, if you had a lot of money in there for new construction, you say, well, you lose a few jobs over here, you gain more jobs over here. Maybe you can talk about a net plus, but you don't even get to that because there's no new job creation. You're just looking at the downward pressure on wages, and a few people make a little bit more money.
It's just mind-boggling.
And
how
there's
far
another
we've gone down.
There's another problem with it, John, and that is the labor protections and environmental protections that you can put into the bill. The problem with those is that there are present labor protections in present law that are not being enforced.
That's right. So this is not the many of my Republican friends are saying, oh, it's free trade. This is not free trade. This is managed trade. We play by the rules. No one else does. We get screwed. This whole thing makes no sense. All you have to do is go back to the NAFTA deal, which has been a complete economic disaster for the United States. And this thing is that 10X. Absolutely makes no sense. So here's my question. Can you defeat fast track in the House?
The vote is extremely close. I think by most counts, the supporters do not have the votes at this time, but they're working on it.
Okay, so the fear that many of us have is that, Congressman Scott, there's so much money involved in this, so much money to be made by, as we said, the elitist, the globalist, that at the end of the day, is that amount of money, is Dr. Green going to put so much pressure on some of these House members that they cave?
Well, that's the problem with some of the politics today. You had Citizens United, which just invited super PACs and huge spending where people come in. I know a friend of mine in Las Vegas was running a virtually uncontested election. 2 weeks before the election, some super PAC dropped $1 million into the race. And all of a sudden, he was in a competitive race and lost a close election. I mean, when you're running for re-election and don't know whether some special interest group can come in with $1 million or more, one group said they're going to spend $800 and some million in this race. But do the arithmetic: $800 and some million at 435 races. That's almost $2 million a race.
It's unbelievable.
That they can, on average, and you figure, 70-80% of them aren't even contested. So you're talking $2, $3, $4 million in a handful of races that'll make the difference in the partisan majority. You don't want to be one of those. You don't want to stick your your head up so that you might be a target. So the one and that creates a serious problem in financing. We got to do something about Citizens United. We have to try to get money out of politics, but all of the pressure now is to actually put more money into politics.
Well, that's it.
It's a challenge for people trying to cast an intelligent vote, because you know that when you aggravate a special interest or two, and you look at the presidential primaries, everybody's looking around for one super PAC or one extremely wealthy individual who can essentially bankroll your campaign to keep you afloat until you can win a couple of primaries. Mm-hmm. Used to be you had to raise your money each week. If you had a bad week, you'd have to drop out because you couldn't raise money for the next week, so you'd have another bad week, and you'd have to pull the plug because your expenses are running. Well, now all of a sudden, you can stay afloat until you get down the line. You got a couple of good states where you can stay afloat, and all you need is one rich backer, and you're in the race. And all of them are going around trying to get this one and that one to support their campaign. And so then you go back to TPP, these trade deals. How are you going to vote in a trade deal if that super rich one individual is bankrolling your campaign, and you got everybody else? Well, you can't aggravate your financial supporter. So if you got a handful of people who support the trade deal, saying that they're going to make it a litmus test. That can create some problems.
Sure, because you don't want to be sitting there on the other side and say, well, I'm going to get somebody that's going to run against me, and they're going to get funded with $4 or $5 million of outside money in retaliation. And so that's why.
It can come. You don't have to do a lot of fundraising. It can come from one or two sources.
That's really the issue.
And that's the problem.
Now, let's just get to brass tacks, because we're in lockstep with Citizen United. I thought that was a disastrous decision made by the Supreme Court of the United States. But how do we stop it now? How would you change that? And I've got 2 minutes.
Well, you can do a constitutional amendment. That's a long way. You can wait until the next couple of Supreme Court. It was a 5-4 decision, so you don't need much change on the Supreme Court. But you need to limit. You need to get some of this money out of politics, because it puts your thumb on the scale. It distorts decision making when people are afraid of one or two huge financial backers coming into a race, distorting the entire presidential race and congressional races. Like I said, you got one organization, and suppose that organization is in favor of the trade deal. Then you got everybody thinking, well, they're going to drop a couple $1 million in the race. I hope they don't drop it on me. And how are they going to vote?
No, you're right. No, it just makes no sense. Unfortunately, Congressman Bobby Scott, we're out of time, but I want to get you back on next week, because we didn't have time to talk about ISIS and what we're going to do there and what the next steps are. I know you're highly involved in that, so I'm going to talk to your illustrious staff and see if we can have you back next week. Thanks for being with us.
All right, and we also have to talk about the budget, because we're hard pressed on that too.